Hello viewers, welcome to Kids Auto and Truck Repair. Today we have a 2014 Acura MDX with a 3.5 liter engine. The customer complaint on this vehicle is the check engine light remains on the dash while the engine is running. The vehicle seems to drive fine. The only issue is the light that's remaining on the dash. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go in the vehicle so we can confirm the customer's complaint. After confirming the customer's complaint, then we're gonna talk about what directions we're gonna go so we can fix whatever that's causing the check engine light to remain on the vehicle. Now, I wanna give a shout out to our cameraman today. We have Dom. So Dom is gonna be our second cameraman, so after Matt. So you guys are very familiar with cameraman Matt. You have been asking me where Matt is. So Matt cannot be here every day. So we're gonna have a team of cameramen and videographers. So we will have Matt and Dom. So Dom will be doing the filming for us also. So Dom, thank you for being here, buddy. So now let's go in the vehicle so we can confirm the customer's complaint. We're gonna confirm the customer's complaint. I'm gonna start the engine. So as you can hear, the engine is running. So Dom, if you can show the dash right there. So this light is remaining on. So check engine light is on, and we have a message on the dash that says check emission system. So it looks like this vehicle is also due for an oil change. The check engine light is on. We have a message that says emission system problem. Okay. So that's customer's complaint confirmed. I'm gonna turn off the engine. I'm gonna turn the key on. I got the scan tool connected, so I'm gonna bring it up. Now, usually when I see emissions system messages on Acura dashboards, the issue sometimes ends up being a air-fuel ratio sensor problem. So let's see. I've dealt with a couple of these in the past, so let's see what we got. Okay, so right off the bat, we have a P0420 trouble code in the engine computer. So catalyst system efficiency below threshold, bank 1. Now, I'm sure most of us are really familiar with this code. This code can be caused by a defective catalytic converter or a problem with the second O2 sensor on bank 1. So the post catalytic converter sensor could be sending a skewed signal to the engine computer, and the engine computer may think that the issue is the cat while the issue is the sensor. So when the scan tool finishes scanning all the control units on the vehicle, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look at my fuel trim numbers to make sure that our engine is running well. We have a good air-fuel mixture in the cylinders. And then if the engine is running well, then we're gonna watch our O2 sensor activity. So the O2 sensor before the cat and the O2 sensor after the catalytic converter. We might have to drive them lean by pumping the brakes. If the O2 sensors respond properly, then the issue will be the catalytic converter, because this car actually has how many miles? Let me check. This car has 118,000 miles. So 118,411 miles. I mean, it doesn't have a lot of miles. Having a catalytic converter that fails at this mileage is a little strange. But we're gonna do some tests to figure out what's going on. So the scan tool is done scanning all the control units. So let's scroll down and see what else we have. We have one code in the tire pressure monitor control unit. We have one code in the electric power steering. The code here is 85-01. It says VSA system malfunction. We don't have any codes on these control units, so that's good. We have the same code on the generic side of the tool, P0420 catalyst system efficiency below threshold, bank 1. All right, so now let's go into the engine computer. We're gonna look at some data pids. Let's go to data. Interesting. Let's look at our fuel and intake data first. Okay. Because if we have high positive fuel trim numbers, that can be the cause of why the catalytic converter went bad. Because catalytic converters usually don't go bad by themselves. There's usually a problem that causes the catalytic converter to go bad. So if an engine is misfiring, that can kill a catalytic converter. If an engine is running lean or rich, that can cause the catalytic converter to go bad. I mean, mostly rich. So this engine is not misfiring. So a misfire is not our issue, unless it's misfired at some point and that got corrected. Maybe that is what killed the catalytic converter. So we have to do some detective work to figure out what went wrong. So we don't have fuel trim numbers over here. That's odd. Let's go to emissions data. So right here. So we have short-term fuel trim bank 1, short-term fuel trim bank 2, and then we have O2 sensor bank 1, sensor 2, O2 sensor bank 1, sensor 2 voltage. So that's good. And then, so I'm just selecting the data PIDs that I want to look at. So we're going to grab our, what data am I going to grab for the first O2 sensor? So air fuel ratio sensor bank 2. What's interesting is that I don't see a long-term data PID over here, which is kind of odd. Unless I'm missing it, I don't see a long-term fuel trim number here. We might have to go on the generic side of the tool to find it. The way these data PIDs are written is a little odd. Okay, so let's look at these PIDs and see what happens. I'm gonna start the engine. So the engine is running. I'm gonna graph the O2 sensors after the CAT, because if we have a catalytic converter that's not working properly, what's gonna happen is all the air that's gonna come into the catalytic converter, instead of the catalytic converter storing that oxygen, it's gonna let it out as soon as it comes in. So that will cause the signal coming out of the O2 sensor after the catalytic converter to be way lower than normal. Or the signal sometimes can match the signal coming from the pre-CAT O2 sensor. So what we don't want to see is a voltage reading that's fluctuating up and down on the O2 sensor after the catalytic converter. So let's graph this. Now this is bank 1 and this is bank 2. So the catalytic converter code that we have is for the catalytic converter on bank 1. So bank 1 is this guy. As you can see, we have a discrepancy over here in this graph. So basically both of these graphs should look similar, but this one looks different from this one. It's kind of odd. Our fuel trim numbers over here look fine. Short term is fine. So short term fuel trim bank 1 is 0.9%, and then short term fuel trim bank 2 is 0.9% also. So in terms of fuel delivery, it looks like everything is fine. So now I'm going to rev up the engine. I don't like how these graphs are not really matching each other. Okay, so right now we have a rich signal on both O2 sensors. So it looks like the O2 sensor is responding to the oxygen content in the exhaust stream. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pump the brake pedal to drive these O2 sensors lean. Let's see how fast they will respond. Okay, they're both responding. Yeah, this is gonna be a quick and easy one. It's starting to look like this is gonna need a catalytic converter. I can drive the O2 sensors lean. Yeah, okay. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna turn off the engine. Let me turn the key on. I'm gonna look at the same data pids, but this time on the generic side. So let's back out. Let's figure out which side is bank one, because this is a V engine. So let me figure out which bank is bank one. Let's go to ignition controls, component information. Okay, so it's not telling us here. Let's go to our service info. Because the other test I'm gonna do is after we look at the data pids on the generic side of the tool, we're gonna put the vehicle on the lift, then I'm gonna use my thermometer so we can measure the temperature of the front of the catalytic converter and the temperature after the catalytic converter. I mean, you guys have seen me do this test here. So we're just gonna check that again. And if it doesn't pass the test, we're gonna go ahead and condemn a catalytic converter, which this is starting to look like it might need a cat. So let's go to common specs. Let's find our firing order. Right here. So this is the V. Okay, so here's our engine. So it looks like bank one is gonna be the bank. Bank one is the bank against the firewall. Okay. All right. So now let's go to our generic side. I always like to look at the data pids on the generic side of the tool because they make more sense to me and they're a lot easier to understand. I mean, for me, not for everybody, but I always like to double check the pids on the generic side. And also, when you look at your data pids from the generic side of the scan tool, you don't have to worry about substituted values and stuff. I'm not saying that's what the case, that is the case here, but you never know. So let's look at our freeze frame data. Let's see when this trouble code set. Okay, so when this trouble code set, the engine speed was 1500. The engine was in closed loop. The engine temperature was 168 degrees. Long-term fuel trim bank 1 was 0. And then long-term fuel trim bank 2 was 0 also. Short-term fuel trim bank 1 was 2.3%. And then short-term fuel trim bank 2 was minus 1.4%. So fuel delivery is good. I guess this catalytic converter just gave up. And then let's see if there's a vehicle speed. Vehicle speed was 39 miles per hour. And then fuel rail pressure was 1187.5 psi. Okay, so all these data pids over here look fine to me. Nothing really alarming here. So now let's go to our data pids. As you can see, we have the one code here, P0420. Let's go to current data. Okay, so we're gonna customize this list. I don't want to look at all these data pids. Let's deselect these pids. Let's grab our engine speed, fuel trim, and then short term and long term. I'm gonna start the engine. Let's make sure that the battery doesn't die on us. Okay, good. I'm gonna turn off the engine. Let's turn the key on again. Current data. So let's select all the PIDs that we first selected: engine speed, fuel system, short term, long term, fuel trim numbers, O2 sensor, bank 1, sensor 2, O2 sensor, bank 2, sensor 2, and then let's grab our O2 sensor, our first O2 sensor data PIDs. It looks like we have current data PIDs, so these are wideband O2 sensors. Okay, and then what else? Let's grab our mass airflow sensor. So that's it. Now, since we are dealing with a catalytic converter code, I'm just gonna graph our second O2 sensor data PIDs. Okay, so we're gonna focus on this one over here. So I'm gonna start the engine. Okay. We're still in open loop. So we are in closed loop right now. Now we're gonna compare the numbers on this sensor, okay? The voltage data PID of this sensor here versus this one. Okay, since it's a V engine, these numbers should be similar. They should look pretty much the same. So our fuel trim numbers look fine. Short-term fuel trim bank 1 is minus 0.6%. Short-term fuel trim bank 2 is minus, it's going between minus 0.6 and 0. And then long-term fuel trim bank 1 is minus 3.8. And then long-term fuel trim bank 2 is minus 3%. Okay. So O2 sensors seem to be working fine. I'm going to pump the brakes. I'm going to drive these O2 sensors lean. Let's watch these sensors. So I'm really focusing on this guy over here. So I'm pumping the brakes right now. You guys have seen me do this trick here several times. This is a pretty good trick to do when you're checking O2 sensors. Oh, it's really windy outside. So I'm gonna let off. Now when I let off pumping, the O2 sensor should PAG reach. So right now they are both showing 0.8 or 0.7 volt. Yeah, so we don't have O2 sensor issues. Our O2 sensors are working well. They are responding to the oxygen content in the exhaust stream. We're good. I don't even have to go under the hood and look at anything. I mean, we're fine. This is just gonna need a catalytic converter. The catalytic converter has failed. All right, so here's what I'm gonna do. I am going to put the vehicle on the lift. Let's use our thermometer to check a temperature difference between the inlet of the cat and the outlet of the cat. And after that, we're gonna call the customer and let the customer know. So, we know it's starting to look like this needs a catalytic converter. So I'm gonna recommend a catalytic converter on this one. But before we do that, let's do a temperature test of the catalytic converter first, okay? So I'm gonna put the vehicle on the lift and then I'll bring you guys back up. I got the vehicle on the lift. I'm going to start the engine. I'm gonna use this rod to press the brake pedal And then I'm gonna press the start button. So as you can hear, the engine is running. I'm gonna grab our scan tool. Okay, so while the scan tool is collecting the data, I'm gonna raise up the vehicle. Yeah, it's interesting how this car already needs a catalytic converter at 118,000 miles. All right, so the car is up. I still have my data pids pulled up on the scan tool. So this is what we were looking at earlier. So let's go under the vehicle. We're gonna use this thermometer to measure the temperature of the catalytic converter. I mean the inlet of the catalytic converter versus the outlet of it. So the first cat is the one against the firewall. So let me turn the steering wheel. Basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna point my thermometer up here to measure the temperature of the inlet of the catalytic converter. So I'm gonna use this guy over here. I'm gonna point it up there. Okay, so the temperature up there is 409 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is the temperature on the inlet of the catalytic converter. So now I'm gonna take the temperature. Now, Don, you can show up down here, actually from this angle here. So this flange, let me put the light. So this flange over here, this pipe is connected to the catalytic converter. So this is the bottom of the catalytic converter. So now I'm gonna use this thermometer to take the temperature of the outlet of the catalytic converter. So right there. So the outlet of the catalytic converter is measuring 340 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so this is definitely lower than normal. Since the inlet has a temperature of a little over 400 degrees Fahrenheit, the outlet, if the catalytic converter was working fine, the outlet temperature should have been around 400 degrees Fahrenheit, because it has to be at least 100 degrees higher than the inlet. Okay, so I'm gonna do this one more time. You don't have to show this over here. I'll just show you the thermometer just to double check myself and make sure I'm making sure that I'm pointing the thermometer up there. So right here, so this is the temperature that we have on the inlet of the catalytic converter. So let's take another measurement over here. So over here we have 347 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so we're done. Okay, so we're done with our testing, guys. This catalytic converter is defective. The fact that the inlet of the catalytic converter is hotter than the outlet of the catalytic converter. Okay, we're done. Now, I'm looking at the data here on the scan tool. I mean, yeah, so the temperature test confirmed to us that that catalytic converter needs to be replaced. It's not the sensors. The O2 sensors are working fine. The engine is running well. Our fuel delivery to the engine is good. Our mass airflow sensor is working well. So bad catalytic converter. So now we're done with the scan tool. So I'm gonna lower the vehicle so we can wrap up this video. We are done with this. I'm gonna make the call. This is gonna need a new catalytic converter. And I don't know how much these catalytic converters cost. And I'm not gonna recommend installing a aftermarket catalytic converter on this vehicle. We're gonna get a brand new catalytic converter from Acura. I don't believe in installing aftermarket catalytic converters. We're gonna get a OEM one. And also, I know there are some of you that recommend using catalytic converter cleaners, but I don't think that stuff even works, okay? So let's turn off the engine. All right, so that's it, guys. I'm gonna leave this right over here. This vehicle needs a catalytic converter. We are done with our diagnosis. I'm not gonna try to use a catalytic converter cleaner. In my experience, that stuff doesn't work. I'm not gonna call my local aftermarket parts store to try to get the catalytic converter. I'm gonna recommend installing an OEM Acura catalytic converter because, you know, they save me time, they last longer, and I have less comebacks when I install OEM catalytic converters because they don't fail, okay? And also, my shop insurance covers the whole bill if I use OEM parts. So I'm not gonna try to install an OEM, I'm not gonna try to install an aftermarket one. So we're gonna call Acura, make an estimate. I'm gonna send the estimate to the customer and then we'll go from there. So hopefully we're gonna get the job, but if we don't get the job, we're gonna move on to the next vehicle. I hope you liked the video. I'm gonna leave this right over here. This was a quick and easy one. I hope you like this. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like the video, give it a thumb down. But if you do, you gotta tell us why so we can make better videos in the future. If this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell so you can get notified every time we upload a new video. If you have any comments, questions, criticism, leave them in the comment box. And then, cameraman Don, thank you for being here. See you guys next time.